Hello, everybody. It is episode 136 of Recotopia. And yes, we are joined with two people today. Joined, as always, by Aaron Dicer.
Hi, Leho, Russell Renos.
And by Jonathan Watkins, who's making an appearance today.
Hello. I think
and I
Aaron
know-
refused to do Thingarinos, right? I think he was just like, I'm not doing Thingarinos. That's too obvious.
Try to keep you guessing.
Okay.
Yeah, Jonathan is here today because
Yes.
not only do I think he would give some awesome insight into this movie as I know Halloween is it may be your favorite movie of all time, right?
Yes.
And John Carpenter may be one of your favorite directors too, I think, of all time.
Correct.
So not only is he here for that, but he's also here because Aaron will not be here next week. And so today, Jonathan is going to be giving a homework that we'll be doing next week, and it'll be just me and him.
Mhm.
So that's why he is here. And would also like to acknowledge chat who have come out here on a Monday, once again, a Monday at a different time. Let's start off with some small recommends. Let's go ahead, Jonathan. What do you got?
I have got a new Netflix movie that I feel like just kind of it came out just last week, but I haven't really heard that many people talk about it. It's done well critically, but I haven't heard a lot of people talking about it. It's called It's What's Inside. It is from 2024. Netflix, like I said, just got released this past week, which I guess I don't know what day of the week. I don't know what date that was. I don't know dates. But early October was when it got released. I guess this is kind of a horror. I think it's getting kind of marketed as a horror movie. I guess it is. It's definitely got some supernatural sci-fi-esque stuff to it, but it's really fascinating. It's directed by this guy, Greg Jardin. I think it's his debut. I couldn't find anything else that he had made. It's got a bunch of young actors that I had seen some of them in random things, like Brittany O'Grady was in the last like Black Christmas remake. But for the most part, it's probably not people you're going to know super well. But they are playing a group of friends from college who are getting together, I guess, a few years later. One of their friends is getting married, and so they're all getting together the night before the wedding and kind of having a last hurrah together. Like even the bride isn't there. It's just the fiance who they're really good friends with, the groom. One person that shows up, though, is a character named Forbes. He is played by David Thompson. You might know him as Gecko from The Boys. That was what I knew him from. They have not seen him in a while. There was an incident when they were at college that you kind of find out bits and pieces about throughout the film that ended up getting him kicked out of school and ended up causing his sister to have to be put into a mental institution. You don't know exactly what went down. Like I said, they kind of give you bits and pieces of that throughout the rest of the film. So he is like a guy that's like he always like brought like games and stuff for them to play at their parties. And so to keep in spirit of his return, he brings a game, which is a machine he has in a briefcase. And that is the game they play. I guess I won't. It's if you watch the trailer, you find out what essentially the briefcase does. It's not in the description. So keeping in with the spirit of, I know Aaron doesn't watch trailers. I know Chris has even been talking recently about how he wished he wasn't watching them. So I guess I'll leave that a little bit to my vest. But it's really, if you can go into this not watching the trailer, I think it will be more interesting to find out what the game is and what it does. But I will say that this game ends up bringing up a lot of secrets that nobody knew about. And then also on top of that, you've kind of got the mystery of why did Forbes come back? What is his motive by being there? And what is his motive by getting them to play this game? And so there's a lot of neat like twists and turns, and it's a lot of fun. And also it's definitely about the generation that basically grew up with social media being a major, major thing. And I think this is one of the first movies that's really done a good job with establishing characters that seem real in that environment, as opposed to being super over the top. One of the characters is even a social media influencer, has become like a very popular social media influencer since college. And so, yeah, I had a lot of fun with it. I think it's, unfortunately with Netflix, I think you get a lot of great stuff because there's so many people that watch it. But then I think there's a lot of these that just kind of fall in the cracks. And I hope this one gets discovered by a lot of people because, man, it was a lot of fun. It was a huge surprise. So, yeah, it's What's Inside.
Yeah, hearing the synopsis on this, I really want to see this now. I had not heard of it until you brought this up. So, yeah, I'm actually looking forward to watching this at this point. It sounds fun, and I read up on the director too. He sounded familiar, but I definitely have not seen. This was his feature debut, I believe. So, he had done a bunch of music videos and stuff before this. So.
Yeah, like video game trailers or something. Yeah, yeah. So it sounded familiar to me too. I was surprised to see this was and I'm surprised it was his first movie because it's pretty. I mean, for a first movie, it's pretty well done. You wouldn't think this was the guy's first movie, but
yeah.
This is one of my favorite movies of the year.
Have you seen it? Yes,
I have seen it. I just watched it.
Wow, you liked it more than me.
No, I loved it. And it reminds me both tonally and genre wise, like if you're trying to place it in the horror genre of like bodies, right?
Yes.
Where it is technically horror elements, but it's really kind of mystery thriller, with a willingness to, be a little violent or whatever. And it's also that same age group figuring out life, figuring out the world, all the social media stuff, like you said, is really good. And it's not spoiling anything to say it's high concept. It's a very high concept movie, which always interests me. But sometimes those movies fail under the weight of the concept. And I don't think this movie does. I think it handles its concept really, really well. And you're always like that perfect balance of like not quite sure what's going on, but knowing enough to be invested. And then it'll reveal some more information. And like, it's really good at that. And add to that, it's shot really interestingly. There are some really interesting artistic choices that are being made here that I loved. I love the way it ends. I really loved this movie.
Yay!
So yeah, I would give it a recommend as well.
I feel justified.
Nice. I will go on with the next small recommend, and is a revisit to a movie that I had not seen since the theaters, and that is 1996's The Frighteners. Peter Jackson did this movie the year after Heavenly Creatures, but it was 3 years before. This was the last movie before he got into Lord of the Rings. It's so interesting to think about this director. I still like, how did this happen? I want to know the story of how this director ended up being, yes, we're going to give you the Lord of the Rings franchise to make 3 movies at the same time. Here's a bunch of money. Go make it. Anyway, he made this movie, which was not a big hit whatsoever when it came out in 1996. It's gotten kind of a cult following since. But it's kind of a sort of a combination of like Ghost, Beetlejuice, maybe a little bit of Ghostbusters, but like an anti-Ghostbusters type of thing, because Michael J. Fox is in this movie and he can see ghosts, and he is employing the ghosts to enter houses and create a whole big haunted house fest. And each time these people have have some sort of thing that happens at their house, there's a convenient business card waiting for them that they can call this number, and he can come out and expunge the ghosts and everything. But there just so happens to be, at the same time he is doing this, there is a ghost who used to be a serial killer, played by Jake Busey, by the way, who is always terrifying. He is going around, and well, it's like I actually don't know if I want to say much more about his character. Actually, I may have gone too far with him already. But there's a variety of characters that Michael J. Fox is running into, but there are a lot of people dying in this movie, and there are these mysterious numbers showing up on people's heads and everything. And of course, because Michael J. Fox is always near these people, when he sees these numbers on their head, they die, and he becomes a prime suspect. But the thing is, there's so many like really interesting characters in here. Jeffrey Combs is in this, playing an extremely odd FBI agent and everything. I had just seen a movie called From Beyond with him in it.
Oh wow!
And like right after I saw this,
Wow.
I saw that. And he's always an interesting actor. Dee Wallace is in this, playing the sister of the serial killer, and she is being held basically prisoner by her mom, who doesn't want her to go out, and is blaming her for her husband being killed, and has kept her in this house for years and years and years and years. And so there's all these plot elements of a serial killer. There's another ghost going around that's killing people. There's this family story that's going on, and then there's Michael J. Fox's own story, where he has lost his wife a long time ago, and this is the reason why he's able to see ghosts now. And then there's another character played by Trini Alvarado, who, if you've seen the original Little Women, or the 1994 Little Women, she was in that. But she is married to some asshole guy who gets killed, and then Michael J. Fox and Trini Alvarado sort of like team up during the movie. But it's a fun movie. I don't know how much I've gotten you to want to see it by my description, because there's so much going on all at once in this thing. It's hard to kind of like zero in. And again, I didn't want to spoil too much, and I still feel like I spoiled a little bit too much. But it's really, really fun. Peter Jackson is sort of like coming into his own. I think he's already made some big, Heavenly Creatures was his like most high profile movie at this point. Everything else before this was like a bunch of like gross horror movie type stuff. And then he makes this, which he teams with Robert Zemeckis on, and it's got a very Zemeckis feel to it as well. And but Peter Jackson, you can kind of see the Lord of the Rings starting to creep in to this movie as well. You can see some of his camera movements and things like that coming up. But this is a really fun movie, and it was good to see Michael J. Fox in a good movie in the 90s. There wasn't very many of them at this point. It feels like he was in a lot of like real bad comedies and stuff. Although I have some affection for the movie Greedy, though. Anyway, yeah, this was good. I'm gonna recommend it to you guys so that you can see it.
This has been on my I need to rewatch it for a while. I saw this in the theater. I don't think I've ever seen it again since, and I think I liked it okay. Yeah, I need to rewatch this. This came out at a weird time too, because horror was not doing well when this came out, and then like 3 months after this is Scream. So you wonder like if this just comes out like 5 months later, like are more people interested in this? You also wonder if Lord of the Rings happens with him, if this is a hit, because he's supposed to do King Kong after this. And then this comes out and Universal's like, oh, hold on a second. Like, maybe we don't want to do this with you. So, no, I keep hearing how like a lot of people really like this now. So I definitely need to give it another look. Plus I love everyone in it. I mean, everyone. Yeah. It's such an amazing cast.
I didn't mention some of the ghosts in here. Shy McBride, who would later be on Boston Public, I believe, was the show that he was on. Yeah. And then and John Aston was in this as well. I wonder if that's how Sean Astin came into the Lord of the Rings picture. But John Astin plays a ghost character called the Judge in this, and he's really fun. So,
and what's his for Full Metal Jacket, right? Arlie Ermy, isn't he in this?
Arlie Ermy, yeah. Arlie Ermy is basically just doing Full Metal Jacket.
Yeah, he's like a drill sergeant, right?
Yeah, exactly.
This movie holds a interesting special place in my heart. Many people know that I didn't go to movie theaters for various reasons until I was much older, and Twister in '96 was my first movie ever in a movie theater.
Wow.
This was my first rated R movie in a movie theater, guys.
Nice.
This was, I think, January of '97.
God, this
Technically,
was
when it
rated
came
R?
out. I
Oh,
think it is.
yeah.
Yes,
I bet
at
it
least
is, yeah.
that's my memory, and I had so much fun with this movie when I went and saw it. And I have seen it since then too. I've rewatched it a couple times, and I just love Michael J. Fox. Hanging out with Michael J. Fox is always fun, and I think Peter Jackson just knows how to tell a story, and so the story's told well, and it's fun, and it's a good watch.
This feels
So,
like your kind of horror comedy. From what I remember of it, this feels like
Yeah.
an Aaron Dicer horror comedy
yeah,
for sure.
definitely.
Mm-hmm.
The scariest movie I've seen this week will be my
Terrifier 3. Sorry.
my small recommend. It is a movie called Dee Dee. This is the terrifying era known as adolescence.
That
Mhm.
picture
Yep.
after you said that.
Dee Dee is a coming of age story. It is beautiful. It is heartfelt. It is very powerful, but it is traumatizing. Like, this is one of those coming of age stories you watch, and just every choice that's being made, you're almost like, it's like almost cringe inside. You're just like, oh no, this can hurt you so bad. Like, so it's very emotionally loaded in that way, but it has so much to say about the human condition, about adolescence, about what it means to grow up, and specifically in this culture as well, which is another thing I love when movies can be an empathy machine like that and kind of put you into a culture you didn't grow up in, a home you didn't grow up in, and kind of feel those feelings. And I really, really liked it. The performances are really good. You can tell it's very, very personal. I believe the director is Sean Wang, and I believe it's his first movie. And you can tell, I mean, the lead character is called Wang, nickname Wang Wang, and you can tell like this is probably stories from his adolescence and his growing up, at least autobiographical. So yeah, I this is a huge recommend. It's available on VOD. Check it out. I'm not sure if it's streaming anywhere, but it should be pretty soon. But yeah, Dee Dee.
I'm glad to hear this. I don't know if you remember this, Chris. I think it was when we saw Maxine together. The trailer for this came on, and I leaned over to you because it's just this is another problem with trailers. Sometimes I leaned over to you and I said, "This looks like every independent coming of age movie ever." Like it was just the way they did the trailer. It's like the quirky parents and like the discount Paula Cole song, and it was just like everything. But it clearly, from what I've heard from other people and what I hear from Aaron, this isn't that movie. Thank God. So I'm definitely going to check it out.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, that is the problem with trailers, because they are trying to get as many people as possible into the theater they can, and so they sometimes are reductive in a way that I don't think the filmmakers ever intend, and it often gets wrong, gets the people they're targeting wrong too as well in the process. So
trying to sell it to like an American audience, even though it's not an American story, is,
Right.
I guess that's always a problem. But yeah.
Yep.
All right. On to the big recommend, which is John Carpenter's The Thing from 1982. I have seen this movie now probably 6 or 7 times. And I think I love it more and more every time I watch it. But this is based on a short story, Who Goes There, by John W. Campbell Jr. It was made into a movie in 1951. Howard Hawks and Christian, I can't remember the last name of that guy, Christian somebody, directed the 1951 version that came out. Apparently the movie that came out in 1951 is nothing like the story, so John Carpenter went back and remade the story, not the movie on which this is based.
Christian Levy.
Okay. All right. Yeah, there you go. Thank you very much for that. All right. This movie starts in space. A UFO wobbles its way towards Earth and supposedly crash lands in Antarctica, where the story is set in 1982. Norwegian helicopters scour the area and chase after a dog, even shooting at it. Their poor marksmanship leads the action to a U.S. science station where all the workers are taking in some leisure time. Our main protagonist, McReady, played by Kurt Russell, is playing chess against a computer opponent, and when he loses, he's a poor sport about it. And by that, I mean he pours his whiskey into the computer's cereal ports after an unexpected checkmate. The Norwegians land and, with rifles in hand, chase the dog on foot through the station. A terrible grenade toss takes out one of the pursuers and the helicopter. Then the Norwegian says something urgent, but the Americans don't know what he's saying, and the guy accidentally shoots one of the Americans in the leg. Eventually, he is gunned down by one of the Americans, and the long, arduous battle between the USA and Norway has come to an end. They have trouble reporting the incident, as it seems like the radio is busted too, and they haven't been able to reach anyone for 2 weeks. And the thought is that maybe the Norwegians had some sort of cabin fever, but they find out that they were only at their station for 8 weeks. And they find out that there should be 8 other people at their base. Dr. Copper, played by Richard Dysart, joins McReady, who pilots their own helicopter over to the Norwegian base. During their search of the place, they find one frozen dead body of a man who has slit his own throat. Later, McReady finds a giant ice block that has been hollowed out. Outside, the burned remains of something sits frozen in the cold. They decide to bring it back with them. Dr. Copper asks Blair, played by Wilford Brimley, to do an autopsy. The movie now allows us to see what appears to be 2 faces splitting from each other, but frozen in horror. The autopsy, however, reveals that everything is normal underneath. As everyone starts settling in for the night, it's decided that the dog that entered the camp needs to be in the cage with the other dogs. After Clark, played by Richard Masur, locks him in and turns out the light, the other dogs are suddenly disturbed to see the new dog's mouth splitting into 4 sections, a giant tongue coming out of the center, and numerous spindles of some sort coming out of his body, giving way to giant spider-like legs. One dog that tries to escape is sprayed with something from the monster's body. When Clark comes back to investigate the commotion, a dog jumps him when he opens the door, and he sees the creature inside the cage. Soon enough, everyone is alerted to the commotion at the dog cage, and McReady, with shotgun in hand, is already asking for a flamethrower. McReady shoots the creature, which is wrapping its tendrils around the other dogs still inside. Childs, played by Keith David in what I believe is his first credited feature movie. He'd been in a few things before, but this was his first credited feature. Arrives with the flamethrower, and the monster, still changing into a variety of abominations, gets cooked. Immediately after the autopsy, Blair explains that this thing can imitate whatever it wants, shaping its own cells to imitate them. They burned the thing before it could fully finish the process of imitating all the dogs. Blair questions Clark about the whereabouts of the dog during the entire day, and finds out that Clark was alone with the dog for about an hour, and the suspicion starts setting in. Dr. Copper and the others watch the video that the Norwegians left behind, finding out that they spent a lot of time 5 or 6 miles from their camp, where they found something buried under the ice after using explosives. McReady decides he's going to check it out. They find what appears to be an alien spaceship in the place where the Norwegians made a discovery. And Norris, played by Charles Hallahan, estimates that the ice was 100,000 years old before it got blown up. They also find a giant hole that must have been the giant ice block they found back at the Norwegian base, which they surmise must have been this thing that they had been introduced to. Blair runs a simulation that suggests that, given the amount of time this thing has had on the base, the chance of one or more of the team being infected is 75%. If this organism ever makes it into civilization, the entire world will be assimilated in 27,000 hours, or a little more than 3 years if you want to do the math. Blair grabs a handgun from his desk. Bennings, played by Peter Maloney, and Windows, played by Thomas G. Waits, bring the original Two-Faced body into a storage room, where under the blanket we start seeing movement while they aren't looking. Windows looks at the body with some suspicion, but leaves just as we see a bloody spindle coming out of the blanket, and Bennings is distracted. When Windows returns, he sees a bloody mess that leads to what used to be Bennings, with the thing's tentacles around its body. Fuchs, played by Joel Polis, tells McReady that he's worried about Blair because he's locked himself in a room and won't answer the door. Fuchs reads from Blair's journal entries what he suspects about the thing and is even worried about the burned remains because there are live cells still in them. Windows runs to tell them about Bennings, and when they get back, they find Bennings gone, having smashed through a window and running outside in the snow. When they surround him, they see the transition hasn't been made just yet, and his hands are still creature-like. MacReady douses him in kerosene and lights him up. It is now decided that anything that had any contact with the thing needs to get burned. The next mission is to find Blair, who is now missing. MacReady discovers that the helicopter is smashed up. A gunshot leads MacReady to a scene where others have already camped out, with Blair wildly shooting his gun and shouting to everyone that he'll kill anyone that comes near him. And he's smashing up all the radio equipment. Childs provides an update that Blair destroyed the tractor and has killed the remaining dogs. Blair yells out that the thing had no desire to be an animal, that it wanted to be us, and reiterates the danger of letting it get anywhere off Antarctica. Eventually, Blair runs out of bullets, and they are able to subdue him. They lock him in a shed, and Blair tells MacReady he doesn't know who to trust. He also tells MacReady specifically to watch Clark, the one who's been around the dogs the most. Knowing now that they have no way to radio anyone or get off the continent, some believe that a rescue team in the spring is their best chance. But MacReady tells them that there's no way they don't get assimilated by the thing by that time, since there's definitely one or more of their team walking around that isn't one of them. So now the question is, how do they figure out who is human? Dr. Copper believes that a blood serum test would do the trick, mixing each person's blood with an uncontaminated blood they have in storage. A reaction would tell them who's human and who's not. When Copper goes to retrieve the blood, it is discovered that someone has already gotten to it and it's spilling everywhere. Because the container did not get broken into, only someone with access could have done it, and that is Copper himself, along with Gary, played by Donald Moffat, who has the only key. Gary and Copper suggest that it could only be one or the other who could have used the key, and if it was given to anyone else, it was on the other's watch. Meanwhile, Windows runs to the arms locker to get a shotgun, but Gary pulls a gun on him before he can load it. But no one can really trust Gary, so they don't want him having a gun either. After a discussion about who's more even-tempered amongst the group, MacReady is given Gary's gun. MacReady decides that the three top candidates for Thingitude, Copper, Gary, and Clark, should all be doped up and held prisoner. While that happens, a huge ice storm begins, and MacReady makes an audio recording about what's going on. He believes that the thing rips through your clothes when it assimilates, making note of some long johns that Windows found with a name tag missing. The only person left who can do any science here, Fuchs, tells MacReady he has a couple of ideas, but also, since one cell from the thing can assimilate anyone, that they should all prepare their own meals and that they should only eat it out of cans. As Fuchs works, the lights go out in the lab and he believes he sees someone pass by. After chasing whoever it is outside, he notices some clothing with MacReady's name on it that has a hole ripped through it. MacReady sees that Fuchs is gone, so he wants to organize a search party filled with people who don't trust each other. He runs to check on Blair, who appears to have fashioned a noose inside his shed. Blair tells MacReady he doesn't want to be out here anymore, but trust is hard to come by, even if Blair looks like he's on the level. Eventually, MacReady and the two people with him find a burned-up Fuchs out in the snow. Some ideas are tossed around about what happened to him, and MacReady suggests maybe Fuchs burned himself so that the thing couldn't get to him. MacReady wants to go with Knowles, played by T.K. Carter, up to his shack because he remembers turning his lights off the last time he was there, and now the lights are on. Back at the station, Knowles comes running back, claiming that he cut MacReady from his tow line after finding MacReady's clothes inside an oil furnace, clothes that might implicate him as the thing. But before they can decide what to do about him, MacReady gets back and tries to enter the station. He eventually goes through one of the windows, and when they find him, he's holding up sticks of dynamite and threatening to blow up the whole station if anyone messes with him. Knowles and Norris try to subdue him, but MacReady breaks free, slamming Norris against some shelves, which makes him stop breathing. When they bring him into the med bay, Copper tries CPR and a defib, leading to perhaps the most famous thing sequence in the movie, as Copper's hands go clean through Norris's chest and stomach, with giant teeth eating his hands. A spindly creature with Norris's head emerges from his body, and MacReady flamethrows it while gross body horror takes place in front of us. Norris's head survives the attack and sneaks under a desk before turning into a spider-like creature and almost sneaks out while no one is looking. But then Palmer, played by David Clennon, spots the spider thing and MacReady flames it up. MacReady wants everyone tied up, but Childs refuses. When MacReady threatens his life, Childs says, "Then kill me." Clark, who took a scalpel during the Norris scene, tries to get the drop on MacReady and is shot dead. Now MacReady believes that any kind of violence on any part of the thing, no matter how small, will cause the thing to emerge. So his idea now is to draw blood from everyone. And if the blood reacts to a heated piece of metal, it will prove who's one of them and who's not. MacReady shows that Windows, himself, the dead copper, and the dead Clark were not things. And Childs lets MacReady know he killed an innocent person, to which MacReady does not react. The next dish of blood comes from Palmer, and the burning wire causes a major reaction. Palmer starts convulsing and turning gross in front of everyone. Before anyone can burn him, he gets to Windows. MacReady burns Palmer and lights up a stick of dynamite to blow him into a million pieces, which, considering what we know about this thing, isn't a good idea. He goes back in and burns Windows as well. The remaining tests exonerate everyone else except for Blair, who they plan to test next. When they go to get Blair, they find the door open and Blair gone. They find a secret entrance under the floorboards where there's a tunnel underneath. Down in the tunnels, they see Blair's been at work on a ship. While they prepare to dynamite the tunnel, Knowles sees Childs outside, away from his post. Then the power goes out around the camp. MacReady believes he blew the generator, a move that he believes the thing wants to do in order to freeze, since it has no way out, and the only way it will live is if it is found by an unsuspecting rescue team. MacReady now believes that there's no way anyone is getting out of here alive, so everyone is going to have to sacrifice themselves to kill the thing. They decide to wreck every remaining vehicle and start blowing everything up to cause a massive fire. When they go to the generator room, they find that the generator is not out of commission. It's just gone. MacReady now wants to sink the whole station down into the ice with massive amounts of dynamite. While down there, Blair, an obvious thing now, takes Gary. Knowles notices something suspicious, and then he disappears from MacReady's view. When MacReady goes to investigate, something crawls underneath the floor like Bugs Bunny, and eventually the thing steals the detonator for the dynamite. When the thing comes up to kill MacReady, MacReady throws dynamite with not much remaining fuse at it and blows it up along with the rest of the station. Outside, MacReady runs into Childs and asks him where he went. Childs said he thought he saw Blair and chased after him, but got lost in the storm. Childs remarks that the amount of fire around the camp will keep the temperature up around here, but not for long. MacReady believes they both will die soon out in the elements. When Childs asks how they survive, MacReady says that maybe they shouldn't. Childs asks, "What do we do?" And MacReady answers, "Let's wait here a while and see what happens." Childs takes a drink from a bottle of whiskey. The movie ends with a shot of the camp in flames, leaving us with some uncertainty as the credits roll. All right, what do you guys think of The Thing?
It gets, like you said, it gets better every time. I love this movie. I come to it recently. I think I saw it for the first time either during pandemic or just after, and I was in awe of the way this movie does this beautiful thing where it manipulates you without it feeling like you're being manipulated. And that's hard to do. Like, we know all the tricks that movies do to keep you invested. And, you know, in this movie doesn't do those tricks. It just rockets you through this story. I think a good example of this is probably when the dog is discovered. Most movies now need to have someone die before everyone knows what's going on. And what I mean by that is, like, some, you know, poor schmuck is going to find the creature or the villain or whatever, and they're going to get got before anybody knows what's going on. But in this case, somebody goes in there and then immediately everybody knows. And then it's an immediate team effort to figure out what's going on. How are we going to do this? And so it feels more organic. It feels more like you're watching an actual story develop than, you know, something that's designed to keep your interest or motivate you. So I really like that about this movie. I think the practical effects are just wild, and I don't know that they're great, but they work. They do what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, they're great. I just want to.
Yeah, they're okay.
I
They're
just want to
great.
say that.
It was interesting. I was reading some stuff about this movie and how poorly received it was, when it came out, and a lot of the conversation was about the effects being bad, like that people didn't believe the effects or whatever. I think Roger Ebert, that was one of his main things, was that it just felt schlocky and dumb to him. And I'm just like, I get what you're saying, but it works in context so well to do what it's trying to do. So yeah, I found that interesting. I also think Carpenter is an expert with understanding when when we should be kept in suspense and when we should know information. And there's an early shot of like just a doorway into the game room, and then a doorway into a hallway, and then a dog comes sauntering out into the hallway and goes into a room, and then you just see a shadow. You don't know who, there's just a shadow. And then we go to the next scene, and it's just such a perfect series of shots to invest the audience in what's going on and to be curious about what's going to happen. So I think it's expertly handled. I also think it's funny. I think this movie has a really good sense of humor. I think my favorite moment this time through was when Blair is going crazy, and someone, I forget who, it may have been Mac, but somebody says, "Come on, Blair, you don't want to hurt anybody," and he immediately takes 3 shots right at them. The way that that's executed is just so perfect. That was great. So yeah, I loved it again this time through. I think Carpenter's career is very interesting because it could have been very different if this movie had performed well. Like, this was kind of his shot, and it didn't perform well, and so then he kind of went in some different angles. But man, it certainly has picked up an audience over the years.
I don't know what Universal was thinking, by the way, coming out with this movie when they did. We talked about it last week. E.T. had come out at this point. It was a tremendous phenomenon
2 weeks before this.
Yeah, and Poltergeist, I believe, is not too long after this, maybe.
I think so.
Or maybe it's before too. I can't remember if it was before or after, but it's the same month for sure. This movie also came out the same day as Blade Runner, which I did not realize until looking at some of the other release information about this thing. But anyway, yeah, they came out with this in June, going up against E.T. and Poltergeist, and thought, why not? And an E.T. is a Universal movie. So they were competing against themselves on this, almost like they didn't want this to succeed the way that they came out with it and everything. So anyway.
Yeah, and the only other thing I would say is, if they're not using the blood test scene in movie film schools to teach how to do a scene like that, then they're failing, because that is just the perfect example of how you do suspense. And I love the blood test scene. I just think it's incredible. So what about you, Jonathan?
Yeah, real quick, I find it so fascinating when you look at this summer and what did so well then, and what are people's favorites now. And I think if you surveyed a lot of people, Blade Runner and The Thing would probably be like your 1 and 2. I'm sure some people would still say Poltergeist or E.T. Or Conan the Barbarian or something like that. But it's just funny to me. Blade Runner and The Thing, neither one of them did anything at the time, and but now they're like all-time favorites for. I'm with you guys on Blade Runner, by the way, but I'm saying, but people in general, there's a lot of people who love that movie. Yeah, this movie sucks. No, I love the hell out of this movie. Chris mentioned at the beginning, John Carpenter's, if he's not on my Mount Rushmore, he's on my Mount Rushmore too. Coming May 2027. But no, he's right there. Halloween, if it's not my favorite movie of all time, it's in that discussion. Halloween is definitely a big reason why I'm a movie person, and definitely a big reason I'm a horror movie person. But I don't remember the first time I saw The Thing. The funny thing about me is I love watching like movies now, and like stuff like Stranger Things, stuff that are set in the 80s. And it's always hilarious to me. And I think we've said this I think I've written sense about this a few times, where people have Thing posters in their rooms. Nobody had fucking Thing posters in their rooms.
Yeah.
Just so we're clear, no one was
Right.
talking about this movie in
Yeah.
the early 80s. It did not do well review wise or box office. Nobody was talking about this movie. It was not getting a lot of airplay. So I don't remember exactly the first time I saw it, because I can't imagine I saw this in the theater. If I did, I don't remember. But anyways, I've always loved it. It's my second favorite Carpenter film. I mean, if you want to argue that it's a better movie than Halloween, I don't know that I can argue too much with you, but it's like 1A and 1B. I mean, these are, if you go to my letterbox and look at my top 100 horror movies, Halloween's number 1. This is number 6. So we're not talking, we're not talking about a huge gap or anything. I think Aaron pointed out a few scenes I was thinking about too, where Carpenter is as good with suspense as anybody ever has been. I remember Ebert comparing Halloween to Psycho, and I think it's kind of fair to compare him to Hitchcock in some ways. I mean, they're very, very different directors. Like, don't get me wrong. But I do think, as far as just that aspect of what he's really good at, if you watch Halloween, or you watch The Thing, or you watch Prince of Darkness, which is a very underrated film of his, or even Christine, there's just these like 10-15 minute stretches in those movies that are just impeccable. Like, you can compare them to anything. I think the last 40 minutes of this movie is just a masterclass in how to create suspense and how to deliver on suspense. And I love these characters. I love that they actually feel like people that have been stuck together for like the last several months. I don't even think they like each other very much, which is, I mean, some of them probably do, but I think overall, like, they're not like friends. They're just coworkers, right? And they've been stuck in this environment. They're going crazy, like you see with that perfect scene at the beginning with Kurt Russell pouring the Jamesons or whatever into the chess game. These people are just going nuts, and then this happens, and it's just like, shit hits the fan in glorious ways. The practical effects, I do love them. I know what Aaron's saying, but I'm never not gonna love practical effects. I think at this point too, like, this doesn't even feel that gross to me, just because I'm more in awe of like how they did it versus now, where it's just all digital, which a lot of digital stuff can look great. I'm not knocking that, but I feel like gore is very different now than it was then. I think then it really grossed me out, but I think now when I look back, I'm just kind of like, and I'll talk about the movie that I double featured this with is also in similar vein of what back then I would have thought it's gross. Now I'm just kind of like in awe of just like watching, like, how did they make that happen? Like, how did the chest compression scene is still like, it not only is it scary, but it's just so fucking cool. Like, it's like the whole thing, like the thing comes up and it bites his arms off, and then you have the thing with Windows death too, where Windows, who I also like to call Discount Jason Patrick when he has the sunglasses on.
Yep.
His death, where he gets kind of sideswiped. I love the scene where they're all stuck on the couch, where they're all stuck tied to the couch, and is it Palmer? Who's the one that, is that right? Was that his name? Palmer? All these names
it's the Donald Moffat character, right?
Yeah, when he starts changing and they're just all like, and you've got like Donald Moffat's like right next to him, just like, freaking the fuck out and everything. And God, there's so many great scenes in this. The humor's great. I always love the line where Bennings is Knowles is in the kitchen playing his music, and Bennings is like, "Knowles, will you turn that down? I'm trying to get some sleep. I was shot today." I've always thought that was really funny. I love McCready saying, "Yeah, fuck you too," when the thing is like coming at him or whatever.
Yep.
And Donald Moffat delivers maybe the best line, like, "When you find the time, I would rather not spend my entire winter tied to this fucking couch."
Yes. It's so well done. Oh my God.
I love Donald Moffat. He's so good in this. He might be my
he
second
and Wilford
favorite.
Brimley are both trying to steal this movie from each other.
Wilford
That's
Brimley.
That's the most impressive digital or effects in the movie is Wilford Brimley not having a beard. Like, that's
Wilford Brimley shot this when he was 47. He is a year younger than I am now.
It blows your mind, right? Like,
hope.
it just blows your mind when you think about that.
I showed this to my wife. I was like, "Hold on a second. Like, do I look like this? Is this what I look like?" Like, no, I don't know.
Yeah.
But Yeah, it's so good. It's so good. It's amazing. It's one of the best movies ever made, honestly. It's definitely one of the best horror movies ever made, but I think it's just in general, it's an amazing fucking movie. So, and
I would have loved
I'm
to.
glad it found its audience eventually. It's crazy
I
to
would
read
have.
the reviews. It's crazy to read the stuff like Aaron was talking about. I went back and and I think a lot of it had to do with when like you said, when it came out. I think people were loving ET. People thought, even if they didn't love Blade Runner or say Tron, they thought, like, they talked about how those movies had a lot more to say, or there was a lot more, like, they were a little, like, a smarter than this one. So I think this
Mhm.
kind of came in the middle of all this stuff that were getting a little more highly regarded at the time. But now, I mean, it's ridiculous. Who would say Tron is better? I mean, I'm sure some people do like Tron better than this. I'm not
Well,
knocking you, but just in general, like, that seems wild to me to compare this to a movie like Tron. But whatever.
who would say that this movie doesn't have something to say?
Exactly. Well,
Like,
that
I
too.
mean, this
That
this
too.
movie, it seems to me to have a very clear worldview about
Yes.
paranoia and trusting friends and who's a friend and who's an enemy. Like,
And
That's
Wrath
a
of Khan,
serious.
Wrath of Khan was around this time too, and I think both of those movies kind of tie together more. But
mm,
Wrath of Khan, of course, was getting much better reviews and much better box office as well. What a crazy summer.
That was the
Anyways.
curious thing about the Ebert one, because if you go back and listen to a lot of Ebert reviews, you're like, wow, he really got this movie right from the start. I didn't realize that people
Mhm.
kind of knew this about this movie until much later, and he was like right there at the beginning. And so something like this, and you find out that he just thought it was just another typical gore fest alien ripoff. I mean, sometimes the best even
I
they
do
get it
wonder.
wrong.
Do you think it? I wonder also, it was a remake, so I also kind of wonder if that factored into, because you have critics that are of the age where they were kids when the original
Mhm.
came out, and I feel like Ebert was a huge fan of the original, if I remember correctly. Like, he did something on that. So, and I love the original, by the way. I think
Mhm.
this blows that one out of the water. They're
Mhm.
very different. Uh,
Yeah.
but I do like the original. Like, I definitely don't think that's a bad movie or anything. But this is one of
well,
the
and
remakes that's way better, in my opinion.
the movie passes the Bechdel test because the only female
That's the
character
most
is a
important
computer
thing.
voice.
It's
So,
Adrienne Barbeau, right?
Yeah, it's
yeah,
John
Carpenter's
Carpenter's
wife.
wife.
Yep.
Yeah.
not a
Um,
single woman in the cast.
apparently, the blood test scene was the reason why John Carpenter wanted to do this movie.
Makes
Was
sense.
yeah, and it was an interesting thing. I actually went back and watched the commentary on this, which is John Carpenter and Kurt Russell. It's
Mhm.
probably one of the most entertaining commentaries I've heard. It's a vast difference between this and the Blade Runner commentary that I heard, where Ridley Scott is basically just like, doesn't really want to tell you. I don't know. It wasn't as fun. Kurt Russell is definitely a lover of movies, and John Carpenter loves talking about movies and stuff. So this is a different experience, um, but that blood scene, yeah, he wanted that in there, and they were both talking about how, yeah, that when it was so disappointing to see that this didn't do well in theaters and all that, but they are so happy now that it has gotten a following since then. So there is justice in this world for this type of thing. I do wonder what brought this movie back into focus
Mhm.
and made it become a cult thing. Remember, The Princess Bride was not a big hit when it came out, and it became a hit, I think, like 5 years after it came out, because I believe either it started showing on TV or people started renting the video, or I can't remember what it was, but people just eventually just, now you think of Princess Bride, and you're like, oh, that must have made hundreds of millions of dollars
Yeah.
when it came out. And well, no, it did not. But I wonder what the same with every movie like this that doesn't do well in theaters and now is highly regarded. It comes down to a few influencers, right? Like, sometimes it takes somebody to come out and say, you know what, all those critics were wrong about this movie. But of course, we have so many now that come back and
Mhm.
retroactively say something that was shitty is good, and we see that in everything. But everything now, you can find an audience for it where you didn't before. It's kind of fun that, even though I hate some of the movies, these people come back and say
Mhm.
this was actually good or whatever.
Speed Racer.
So yeah, Speed Racer's one of them. Just the fact that that movie does find an audience, it does find the people who want to like something like that is a good thing, I think. It's just that I get annoyed by it a lot of times where I'm like, this movie was good actually. The other thing about the blood test scene, they were shooting this movie in 1981 when AIDS was first coming about. They didn't know much about AIDS, but they knew that what they were making at the time was kind of paralleling a lot of the things that were going on. And I think maybe in retrospect, they found out that they were paralleling a lot of the things about AIDS at the time, which I thought that's fascinating to be at making a movie where you don't really know a bunch about something. And then later on, it becomes a super prescient thing.
Does he talk about that in the commentary? Because I've read where he said something about he was thinking like cancer, right? Wasn't that kind of his idea, or just disease in general?
Yeah, I think so, like a disease or whatever. But yeah, they do mention they do mention AIDS in this. They're talking about how while making it, they just saw this was the first reporting in the media was about AIDS when they were making this movie. So they were kind of like, wow, this is we don't know who has it. We don't know how to find out who has it. And it's all being paralleled in this movie that they're making and everything. So that was an interesting aspect to it as well. But I would, and in addition to recommending this movie wholeheartedly, I would also recommend for those of you who have access to the Blu-ray, watch or listen to the commentary to this, because it offers a lot of fascinating extra detail as well. So
nice.
All right, we're going to go on to our super secret double feature. Jonathan, what is your super secret double feature?
Yeah, I was having a really tough time with this because I was really focused on just a group of people like stuck in an environment together. And for some reason, nothing was hitting me. And I actually rewatched the movie that I ended up choosing. I rewatched it like maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. And it was the first time I had seen it since the late 80s. And then I was like, and I almost made this my small recommend, but then I was like, oh, this is perfect because it's another 1980s film. It's a remake of a 1950s sci-fi horror film. This one actually did pretty well at the box office. Like, it did okay, and it actually got really good reviews at the time. But that's 1986's David Cronenberg's remake of The Fly. This is a movie that, like, when I saw this, I didn't see this in the theater, but I saw this, I don't know, a year or two ago after that when it came on cable, and I was like 11 or 12 or whatever. This movie scared the crap out of me, and it just disturbed me. It was so, like, I just found it very just gross at that age. I had not watched it, at least not all the way through since, and I decided to, it's on Criterion Channel right now. They have a sci-fi or like some kind of horror thing for this October. And it's in there. So I rewatched it and I was blown away. Like, this movie is great. For those that haven't seen it, you've got Jeff Goldblum plays a scientist named Seth Brundle. For some reason, one of my all-time favorite character names. He has created these telepods that he can transfer non-live matter through. He's figured out a way to transfer like fruit and stuff like that. He still can't figure out a way to do live matter. He's finally successful though with this baboon. After unfortunately one series where he's not successful. That's a very sad moment in the movie. But he does get it working throughout all this. During this time too, he has met a science journalist, and he has fallen pretty mad in love with her. She is played by Gina Davis. They ended up being a real life couple for a while. I don't know if they got married, but they were definitely a couple for a little while after this. And you can see it. They have really good chemistry on screen. They are super hot together. This is this weird moment in time where Jeff Goldblum is like, they're really trying to make him like a sex symbol, which is just. Not saying Jeff Goldblum's a bad looking dude. He's not, but it was just, I don't know. It's just knowing Jeff Goldblum now, like Jurassic World and on. Although even in Jurassic World, I guess you have that meme, right? Where he's like got his shirt off and he's laying there. But it's just funny to think of him like in Independence Day versus like him in The Fly, where he's like this kind of like almost like Michael Douglas kind of like a character. So he does figure out a way to do it. She is out at something with her ex-boyfriend, who is what's that guy's name? It's is it John Getz, who is like the face. You might not, but he's a great 80s character actor. He played like slimy assholes and stuff. He's in Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead as another slimy asshole. That's the one I always remember him from. But she's at like a shindig with him, and Goldblum's character gets really jealous, and he's getting really jealous. He's drinking, and he's like, "Fuck it, I'm just going to transfer myself," and like from pod to pod, and he does it successfully. But a little house fly, gets in the pod with him, and so eventually he becomes the Fly. It's great though. It is. I mean, the Thing's probably better, but it's comparable. Like as far as like two 80s like sci-fi horror classics, these are both very comparable. I think they play well with each other. Just based on the fact they're both obviously remakes of also very popular 1950s sci-fi horror films. I also recommend the original in this. The original in this is a lot of fun. It's very different. It's much more lighthearted, but you get Vincent Price. And you get the help me or whatever. That's become a pretty famous thing. I also forgot that The Fly is the one where we get the line "Be afraid, be very afraid," which is a really cool line delivery by Gina Davis in that movie. But I love The Fly. I found out I love The Fly. I didn't know that, but it's great, and I think it would be a really awesome double feature here. So
I think so too. Absolutely. I haven't seen it in a while, but I definitely I remember a lot of the scenes, especially Gina Davis giving birth. Anyway,
that does happen.
That's right. Aaron, what is your super secret double feature?
I went round and round and eventually landed on the paranoia, passing of disease kind of thing as the common thread, and went with another pronoun game title with It Follows. For my double feature.
Definitely.
I really love this movie. It is a movie. It's kind of sexually transmitted disease, the monster. If you want to kind of sum it up, and so it's a really interesting concept. It also exists out of time in a way, like it feels like it could be the 80s, but they also have little device like seashell devices that are maybe
like a seashell Kindle. It's like
or something like that. And so it's purposefully almost out of time, which I really like and find interesting. I think David Robert Mitchell, I think this was his first movie. His follow-up, Under the Silver Lake, is one of the worst movies I've ever seen, in my opinion. So
the polar opposite on that movie. By the way,
you love that movie, don't you?
I'm sorry.
No, that's good.
What were you talking about?
Under the Silver Lake. There is a chance we saw different movies, though, Chris, because the screener I got during award season, I think he edited it after that, before officially releasing it. I haven't seen the official release version, and maybe it cleans up some of the messiness.
I don't know. It's still kind of a messy movie, but I really, really, really enjoyed the underlying plot of that movie. I thought it was fun. And I think Andrew Garfield is always worth watching no matter what. So
absolutely. And A Big Swing is always fun to watch too. So, and it's definitely that. But yeah, this movie is well worth a watch, and I think it fits with the thing pretty well. So
I think you meant Smile, Aaron. Smile was a way bigger hit than It Follows.
Yes, it was. It was.
Smile.
Yeah. All right. So what is next week's homework, Jonathan? It's going to be you and me. So what is next week's homework?
Yeah, this is the week of, I guess it'll release the week of Halloween. We're going to record it next week, but this will release the week of Halloween. So of course I'm going to do a romantic comedy. No, but I wanted to do something. I actually thought I was really loving your fascination with giallos recently, Chris. So I thought about going that route, but I decided we had to do something that actually takes place around Halloween. It's so confusing to me, like how popular this movie may or may not be. I'm going with Trick or Treat, which is from 2007 or 2009, depending on where you look that up. It's a 2009 release, but it was also playing festivals and stuff. So, but make sure if you're looking for this, listeners, just make sure you type in Trick or Treat, because you might accidentally get some of the several other movies called Trick or Treat or Trick or Treats, or there's like one from the 80s, like with Skippy from Family Ties, which is also kind of worth a watch in a weird way, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the one from 2009.
Treat Williams has a movie that came out one time.
Right, exactly. I have never seen this, and I have never heard of it. I mean, weird, right? The title is very, very simple. Like, I should have heard of something called Trick or Treat, but I haven't.
It's interesting. So, it got released. I'm glad you haven't. I'm glad you're going to be watching this for the first time. This is anthology horror, which is one of my favorite subgenres of horror.
Awesome.
And this is kind of the return of anthology horror, because now it's kind of back again with like the VHS movies and stuff. But that had not been made for what I think that's why it had a hard time getting an actual release date, even though it was like it played like at a festival and it did really well. Everybody loved it. But then it just, whoever had it didn't know what to do with it. And it actually, I don't even think it really got a theatrical release. It basically got dumped. And so there for a while, it wasn't really talked about. But then it just really developed a following. And so it's hard for me to know if this is one a lot of people haven't seen. But I think a lot of people are going to be coming to this for the first time. Sam, who is the character we see on the screen right there, that's become a very popular Halloween costume. So so that's, like I said, I get confused as to how many people actually know about this movie, but I know in the horror community it's obviously well regarded, and it's one that I've really grown to love. I love anthology horror so much, so I'm really excited to talk about this. And I didn't want to just do like a Halloween film or something, because those are ones that are on constantly and people have seen all those, and this was probably the next best thing as far as something that was set around this time and that like a general audience would enjoy. So I didn't want to get too crazy, but
anytime you see a movie like this that has a high 6 rating on the IMDb, you know it's good.
Yeah, it's like a 9 in real life.
Because even horror movies that came out that are like in the 5s are usually pretty good, because it's not for a mass audience. So somehow some of these people who are drawn to these movies then go immediately to the IMDb for some reason. I don't know why that's all about, what that's about. But I saw a lot of stuff from the Modern Horrors gang. A lot of times I was like, why is this at 5.2? It should be like a little bit higher than this. I'm not saying it should be in the 7s or 8s, but all right. Well, that's going to do it for this week. Once again, chat, thanks for coming out and watching us on a different time and day. We are going to be back to our normal Tuesday time at 11 next week. So just remember that as Aaron disappears for a week. And we will be watching Trick or Treat. I can't wait to see that. I love anthology horror, so I'm all about it. Anyway, that's going to do it for this week. We will see you next time. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.